What next for Egypt's unfinished revolution? The Mubarak dynasty has been toppled. The former president will soon be on trial. Parliamentary elections are due in just 3 months' time. But there is an apprehensive mood in Cairo's Tahrir Square. My guest today is one of Egypt's most prominent liberal intellectuals, Tarek Heggy. He advocates wholesale reform of religion, education and politics. But how many Egyptians share his vision of a 21st century renaissance on the Nile? Tarek Heggy, welcome to Hard Talk.
I'm delighted to be here.
What is going on in Cairo? In the last few days, we've seen violent scenes, clashes in Tahrir Square, reminiscent of what was happening in February. What on earth is going on?
Normally, a revolution will not be complete in 2-3 years. Mao Zedong once was asked by one of your great politicians about the French Revolution, and he said, it is too early to talk about it. So this was 200 years after the revolution. Of course, this is an exaggeration, but it is in the process. But it's far from being complete.
Far from being complete, and now there is confusion about the attitude of the public toward the military, because in those recent demonstrations in Tahrir Square, we heard people calling for the resignation of the chief of the current military government, Field Marshal Tantawi. Have the public lost faith in the army?
I think we can't talk about the public as one body in Egypt. Egypt, for the first time since 1952, not 81, since 1952, has this open theater that is open for anybody to come on the stage. Muslim brothers, liberals like myself, Copts. Do you know that the Copts usually demonstrate in Egypt inside the cathedral? It's the first
Coptic Christians.
Exactly, the Orthodox.
Yeah.
They always demonstrated inside the cathedral. It's the first time in their history to go outside in the streets, which means they said, okay, we are Egyptian first and Copts. So we have all colors on the stage.
Well, I take that point, but you, for one, were writing just weeks ago that you were feeling very positive about the role of the military in particular, the way they'd handled the toppling of Mubarak and the transition. Are you feeling so positive about the military now?
Absolutely, I have no problem. I tell you why. I look at what was going on in Tunisia, Egypt, Libya, Yemen and Syria and say 2 armies refused completely to shoot at their own people and 3 did the opposite. Why? Because the 3 armies that shot at people were led by the sons of the rulers. We had a national army. And if somebody says to me Tantawi was part of Mubarak's regime, I say I don't give a damn for this. I know for sure, I know from his mouth that he refused to shoot at the Egyptian people and Mubarak wanted to get rid of him, and actually he got rid of Mubarak. But he ate him on lunch before Mubarak
well, but surely the point is that it may well be that the senior echelons in the military were looking after their own interests, and their own interests are vast in the Egyptian economy, not least.
It's a possibility.
The question is, why would an Egyptian who risked his life or her life protesting for so long in Tahrir Square, continuing to demand democracy and reform, why should they trust what is, in essence, a junta, military junta?
Exactly. A military junta should not be allowed to rule Egypt as what we have seen in South America for decades. But I can only talk to you about what I have seen in Tahrir Square for 18 days. The spirit was totally different. I found everything opposite of my expectation. I went for the first time to Tahrir Square to see a very dirty square. It was very clean. My daughters used to go there and to Cairo and talk about harassment. There was no single case of harassment in Tahrir Square.
With respect, Tarek Heggy, you're talking about what happened in February. I'm talking about what happened a few days ago.
Exactly.
When the military were using the sorts of words about the protesters on the square that Mubarak's people were using just a few short months ago. They were calling them seditious, they were calling them thugs and criminals, they were talking about cleaning out the criminals from Tahrir. It does seem to have flipped in the last few weeks.
If the spirit of the 18 days, initial 18 days, does not confront the military junta, we will be down the drain, and I don't think this will happen. I think that the spirit of the new Egypt will even confront the army if the army tries to repeat the banana republics of South America. I think the army takes people very seriously. I know that for sure. They are
how do you know that?
I know that from my connections. I talk to people. I was talking to Omar Suleiman most of the past 20 years. So when you are in the Middle East, the CEO of a major company. I was the CEO of a major British company for 10 years. People take you seriously. People speak to you. Yeah? And they when I say us now, I mean my oil company.
Yeah, well, I'm interested that you couch yourself as part of that elite, because it is the view of many that it's the elites who right now, post-February, are failing to deliver on reform. Let me just read to you the words of somebody who is respected in the think tank community, Nabil Abdel Fattah from the Al Ahram Centre. He says, quote,
great mind.
Well, great mind, and this is what he says, and it may be relevant to you. People are realising no reform is going to be initiated by the elites. It has to come from the street, or it will not come at all.
I totally agree. I totally agree to that. Nabil Fattah is a great thinker, a great writer, and I believe if the elite cannot have the sympathy of the street, we will be in the hands of the Islamists, and that's what we are trying to do. We are trying to say to the masses that Egypt should be a civil society, should not be under bureaucracy, should not be an Islamic republic. Are we going to support? We may not. It depends on the homework. If we do the homework, the Christians of Egypt, if the free women of Egypt, if the liberal men of Egypt do their homework, we will not end up with 4 million saying no to in the referendum. This was very agitating to me.
I'm going to stop you, because you speak with the passion of a veteran liberal secular campaigner in Egypt, and we're going to get to your thoughts on the Muslim Brotherhood in a moment. But before we get there, just another specific challenge for the military government right now. It's about justice and accountability. In the Hard Talk chair just a short time ago, I had the Secretary General of Amnesty International. He's been talking to the military government. He's been saying to them, look, you must deliver on justice. Justice for the loved ones who lost relatives in the killings of January and February, 800 and more of them. Also justice for those who were beaten, who were wounded, who were detained, hundreds and thousands of them detained for periods and still being detained.
Can't agree more.
Yeah, but the military doesn't appear to be listening.
The military is not supposed to do all of this. The military is supposed to look after the transit period and take us to the transformation and leave us with a president, with a new constitution, with a new cabinet and parliament.
Yeah, but what do you mean the military is no part of this? The military is still running courts. I mean, emergency law is still being used.
Absolutely, but what I meant, the military cannot deliver all of these things. They are not trained to do this. They are not qualified to do this. They have been the safeguarding force to the people, but they cannot deliver. They are trained to fight. They are not trained to write a constitution. They are not trained to run referendums and elections. What we want them to do is to do what they said. We will be, in less than 1 year from the revolution, 25th of January, we'll have a new constitution, a new parliament, a new prime minister, and a new president. And we are trying to go that way, but we disagree in Egypt on this order. Some people would like myself, to have a constitution first. We need to know the rule of the game before we start the game. But some people say, and the Islamists in particular, no. We have to have the elections, and the people who would be elected are the ones who would work out the constitution.
Well, you've there isolated one of the key debates and disputes right now in Egypt, which may well colour so much of what happens in the next few months. Are you telling me that you still oppose the notion of having parliamentary elections by the end of September?
Absolutely.
And yet you call yourself a Democrat?
Absolutely. I say that even in our history, we had only one democratic era from 1924 to 1952. The Constitution was worked out in 1923. At the end of the year, we had the elections, and then we had the first elected government in 1924. This seems to me to be the rational way to go, that we know the rule of the game before we start the game.
Yes, but you did say to me just a moment ago, you expressed wholehearted support for the notion that the street must drive the nature of Egypt's reforms. And the street, it seems, according to opinion polls, is speaking loud and clear. 76% of Egyptians support the idea of having parliamentary elections by the end of September.
No, they were asked to give their opinion on 4 articles that they have nothing to do with that. They were asked, do you agree or you disagree to these 4 articles? But they didn't say patently clear, we want to have the parliament before the constitution. And we are now saying the following: if they choose this, we will abide by the rule. But we are trying not to go that way.
So with your contacts, the ones you talk about so proudly, you're saying to your people, who you know well in the military, that they should still stop the plan, abandon the idea of early parliamentary elections, and go about writing a constitution first?
This is what I'm trying hard with many people to do, especially the minorities.
Isn't it difficult, though, for people like you who've been talking reform in Egypt for an awful long time, and I'm thinking also of people like Mohammed al-Baradei, to now, after everything that's happened since February, be telling the Egyptian people and the world that the one thing you don't want is elections?
No, we absolutely want elections, but we want to know the premises on which we stand. And you don't have a written constitution here, but you have constitutionally customary rules, and these rules were formulated way before your elections. What I'm saying is, we try to say to people, we need a constitution that will not take us to autocracy and theocracy, because we see this. We try to say this democratically. If we succeed, fine. If we fail, also fine. But we have the full right to say to people, you might repeat the Hamas experience in Gaza. Yeah, well, and we are trying to alarm them not to do that.
You are trying to alarm them, that's for sure. I mean, why do you say that if the Muslim Brotherhood, who of course have now formed their own party and will be fighting in the elections whenever they come, why do you say that if they do very well, and they're only going to fight half the seats, they say, but if they do very well, why would that be pushing Egypt toward autocracy?
Because personally, I don't believe there are moderate Islamists and otherwise. There is no single moderate Islamist on earth. There are moderate Muslims. But once you are Islamist, it means that you want to run life, run the society. Your terms of reference are religious. So I don't believe that there is one single person that deserves correctly, objectively, to be described as moderate Islamist.
But the truth is, you don't know what the Muslim Brotherhood would do were they to hold parliamentary power, because, well, they haven't said. I mean, we had Sam Malerian, one of the so-called moderate voices of the Brotherhood, on the programme recently. I pushed him on various policy decisions. For example, would alcohol be illegal in Egypt?
I watched that.
Yes, and he wouldn't tell me. I mean,
absolutely.
It was quite serious.
Okay, this is the core of the matter. I was speaking at a number of think tanks here, including the House of Commons a few days ago, and I said, I don't want to keep saying to them, are you democratic or not? Do you believe in women's rights or not? I want to go to issues like this. We want to discuss things like others, plurality, Christians, Jews, women, tourism, yeah, many things. Education, for instance. I asked one of the leaders of Muslim Brothers the following question. I am very much involved in many councils of educations, including the Supreme Council of Education in the Emirates. And I know that the best system in the world is not in a great country, in a large country. It's in Finland, a very small country considered to have the best educational system. When you say to the Muslim Brothers, what do you think of this? You know what Abu Futuh, the leader of the Muslim Brothers, said here in Chatham House a few days ago? He said that, to the person who said to him, what do you think of an education system like this, based on innovation and critical mind? The answer was, you're trying to sell to me a colonial and imperial agenda. So we need people to know.
Yes, but when you have written, and you have extensively, about the need to modernise the Egyptian education system, you've said that at the moment the system doesn't encourage students to question, to think critically, and you've pushed for a complete change in the way education is run in the country. That is a massive sort of long-term institutional change. But this conversation is conducted in the spirit of what's going to happen in the next few months.
Absolutely.
I mean, shouldn't that be where your focus right now? Because the stability of the nation is at stake.
I could focus on the two of them, and I could focus also on things that might abort this to happen at any time. If I end up with a Minister of Education like the Minister of Education in Gaza today, I will never have a chance to talk about modern education.
But here's a question for you, bringing it back to this notion of the street and what the mass of the Egyptian public wants. If you are right, and Egyptians do not want an Islamicized government, why is it that at the moment populist politicians who are seeking to win support appear to be pushing an agenda which is very much an Islamic agenda? For example, right now there's a huge fuss in Egypt over the teachings at Cairo University's English department, because one of the set texts includes a lesbian scene. It's a book written by an American author, yes. And Islamic groups are trying to get that banned, and the press is running with this story. The impression I get is that the public, readers of newspapers, appear to be outraged by what the university is doing.
Politicians, and I'm not one of them, yeah, I'm a writer, yeah, politicians try to have some common ground with the Islamist, because if you are in 100% hostility with them, you would lose some votes, or maybe many votes. I don't come from this angle. I come from the angle of somebody who thinks of the history of his country, the future of his country, what is the best, and I try to write this. I believe that the best thing the West ever did was to tell to the clergy, we respect you, you are great inside the church or the synagogue, but you have no right to say whether Galileo was the right man or not, whether Copernicus was sane or insane. You don't run the society, you have no say on Darwin. Once we have them in, do you know that Saudi Arabia doesn't teach philosophy? It is the only country on the face of earth that does not have this subject. There is nobody that ever studied inside Saudi Arabia philosophy. Why? Because you know why. Because philosophy takes you to questions. Also, imagine that it's the only country that you can study biology without reading the name Charles Darwin.
Yes, well, Saudi Arabia obviously is a model which not even the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt says it's actually going to follow. But,
yeah.
but let's get back to what's practical in Egypt. I mean, if the liberals, of whom you are a powerful spokesman, if the liberals were serious about pushing their agenda, why is it, for example, that the reforming Prime Minister in the current government has failed to provide women with any prominent posts in his government at all?
It's a grave mistake. I wrote about it. I wrote in Ahram that the committee that worked out the constitutional amendment did not have one single woman.
But this Prime Minister is supposed to be on your side.
My side is very large. You know that the largest front on earth is the Liberal Front. It has, actually, it has everybody.
But my point is that you're not in active politics, but those liberals who are in active politics appear to believe that the public of Egypt won't wear their more, if I can say it this way, extreme, liberal, secular ideas and practices. The Egyptian public, they believe, isn't ready for that.
I think that talking about this Prime Minister and this particular point, I totally disagree with. I think he should have given a good example, but it is not the end of the world. Yeah, if somebody makes a mistake like this, we lived with mistakes for 30 years, yeah? And with Islamists, Gaza has been living for 5 years. We all are green and new with democracy. All what I'm trying to say and to do is to say, don't let us have a system that will abort any chance of progress.
Here's what one liberal activist, Shadi Ghazali Khab, said recently. He's forming his own party. He said,
a great young man.
Yeah,
yes.
But, well, you know, you keep praising these liberals, but these liberals themselves see that there's a fundamental problem on your side of the political fence, because he says, quote, the liberals have failed to form a true ideological party that knows the street language of the people.
To a certain extent, not to full extent, but there are people who
do you speak the street language of the people?
No, I personally do not, but I tell you one thing. There is a very good liberal party formed by Naguib Sawiris that he tried very hard. He went to the 28 provinces of Egypt, and he took all the other liberal parties with him, the ones who didn't accept to join his party, and he spoke to people in Upper Egypt, and we are all new players, including the Islamists, and I believe that there is nothing wrong in having them on the stage, because they will not remain as one body. I always said that I want him on the stage. Once we have them in the stage, we have right, left, and middle, as in any human society. There is nothing that could keep them united except oppression. And they have been oppressed. And I wrote against the oppression that they were subjected to. But I believe that the liberal parties will do well in the next elections. Everybody says in the next elections the Muslim Brothers will have 50%. I assure you, they will not have one above 30%. They will have way below. You may have the right to tell me based on what. I tell you, in the elections at the university a few weeks ago, they got 23%. In the student unions.
But one huge factor in who will win out is surely going to be the economy. We haven't talked about it, but in brief, it seems to me that people like you, with your long business experience and a liberal outlook which encourages open, free trade, deregulation, you're offering the Egyptian people a vision of economic reform which is little more than sort of shock therapy, massive reductions in subsidies, reduction of public sector wages. Is that going to be popular?
No, and it doesn't have to happen this way. I was asked once by Gamal Mubarak, do you really support subsidizing education? I said, yes. And then he said, and food? I said, yes. And he said, how could you be a liberal when you say this? I said, I mean, a liberal, there is no model for liberals, number one. Number two, Egyptians live today in accordance with a social contract that was formulated by Gamal Abdel Nasser. Abdel Nasser, as if he said to you, you are an Egyptian, I'll give you a job, I guarantee a job for you, a very lousy salary, but I finance the education of your children and I find jobs for them. This was his social contract, which has happened in Algeria, Libya, all the countries that imitated Egypt. I say you want...
The problem, of course, is that you've got a budget deficit in Egypt that's spiralling out of control, close to 10% of GDP.
Very serious.
Everything about your economy is extraordinarily weak right now.
It's very gloomy. I understand. But now I say, if you have a widow who is taking a pension of 200 sterling and you ask her to pay 2,000 sterling rent for the flat because we fixed the rents, she has the full right to say to you, no, 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 let us review the package. We need real jobs, real salaries, and then you remove gradually the subsidies. There is no capitalism as per Adam Smith anymore on earth. And I don't believe in this, and I believe in social fairness, and I believe that you can't slaughter the Egyptians by saying, tomorrow, no subsidy of food.
Well, which is why Egypt has a huge problem with the IMF and the World Bank right now, because they want to tie future loans to
subsidy removal
and slashing of government expenditure.
Yeah.
But before we end, and we must end soon, I actually want to move on to another area where it seems to me there's a question about how in tune with the people of your country you are. You've always described yourself as an admirer of Sadat, and you believe that Sadat did the right thing in pushing the peace with Israel, and that you believe Egypt made a mistake by turning that into a cold peace, not a warmer peace.
Absolutely.
Do you think right now that reflects the feeling of the Egyptian people?
No, because the lawyer of the case was very incompetent. I mean the Mubarek regime. The lawyer of the case, I mean in any case, even if it's a fair case, you need a competent lawyer.
The current government, the government that you are prepared to put your faith in for the time being at least, they have... Ministers have called Israel the enemy. They've talked about a new, better relationship with Iran. They've certainly warmed up relations with Hamas and opened the border across Rafah into Gaza. They've taken a series of decisions which have upset Israel, upset the United States, but which appear, for the moment at least, to be supported by the Egyptian people.
Because I'm independent, I can say the following. These people are singing to the masses. Egypt doesn't have a leadership today. Egypt needs to reach the level of having leadership. Once you have a leadership, it is either to go war or peace. I would be advocating that we have to go peace because we cannot afford otherwise, and there is no reason otherwise. Actually, there is no reason. We have recovered our Sinai. We all, by the way, even the hawks of the Arab world do not endorse a war with Israel. Nobody can endorse a war between non-nuclear against a nuclear power.
It's not so much about a war with Israel, it's about asserting Egypt's regional power. That's what...
There was no leadership to tell people that we better go and focus on our domestic affairs. I try to advocate this. We had enough occupancy and we have been preoccupied with external matters for long. I would love to see a prime minister and a president who say to Egyptians, for 2 decades we will focus on domestic affairs, creating jobs, improving education, women's rights, so forth.
Well, that's what you'd like to hear. I wonder whether you will. And I wonder what you make of this. Farid Zahran, a member of the Social Democratic Party, another liberal party in Egypt, says, if Egypt builds a modern secular state, that will colour the whole region. But if it goes into a dark tunnel, Egypt will take the whole region with it. Which way is it going to go, do you believe?
I'm very optimistic that we will not go into the dark tunnel. I agree to the first part of the statement. Whatever Egypt does, it usually will have a tremendous impact on the region. There is a good chance, I don't guarantee anything for you, there is a good chance that we do well. And we have to work hard on it. And let me add one thing. Well, there is no tomorrow. Tomorrow is what we make.
That's a good way to end. Tarek Heggy, thank you very much for being on Hard Talk.
Thank you, sir.